Today's reading is dedicated to my friend and supporter, Jose Varela, and he requested a poem by Robert Haas, which is an elegy for his younger brother. It's from the poem August Notebook, A Death. I will read 2 of the 4 poems that are within that one elegy. Robert Haas says he didn't sit down to write a poem about the unexpected death of his younger brother. Quote, I just, do what poets do, which is sit down in the morning and write, he said. I just kind of wrote my way through what came to me, end quote. What came to Haas, the former poet laureate of the United States, was a mournful elegy. August Notebook, A Death. The poem, which starts off with a series of typos, purposefully making it hard to read, is included in Haas's collection, The Apple Trees at Olema, which was released, 2010. Haas is no stranger to the personal poetic narrative, but he had to take a slightly different approach when writing about his brother, who had cerebral palsy and occasionally lived on the street. To get some of the texture of my brother's life required me to write in a different way, he tells Fresh Air host Terry Gross of NPR. I was saying to myself at the time, God, this is very prosy material, but of course, you can't write this if you don't go there. Haas received the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award for his collection, Time and Materials. His other collections include Sun Under Wood, which received the National Book Critics Circle Award, and Human Wishes, Praise, for which he received the William Carlos Williams Award. He was poet laureate for the United States between 1995 and 1997, and is still going long and strong. He just released another book. I guess I should stop this long preamble and get going. Once again, thank you so much, Jose, for always being so sweet and kind to me. And we will begin. 1. River Bicycle Peony. I woke up thinking about my brother's body. That cue, that was my first bit of early morning typing. So, the first dignity, it turns out, is to get the spelling right. I woke up thinking about my brother's body. Apparently, it's at the medical examiner's morgue. I found myself wondering whether he was naked yet, and whose job it was to take clothes off, and when they did it. It seemed unnecessary to undress his body until they performed the exam, and that is going to happen later this morning, and so I found myself hoping that he was dressed still, though smell may be an issue, or hygiene. When the police do a forced entry for the purpose of a welfare check, and the deceased person is alone, the body goes to the medical examiner's morgue, in the section for those deaths in which no evidence of foul play is involved. So the examination for cause of death is fairly routine. 2 policemen, for some reason I imagined they were young, found my brother. His body was in the bed, which was a mattress on the floor. He was lying on his back, according to Angela, my brother's friend, who lives in the building and is schizophrenic, and always introduced herself as my brother's personal assistant. And he seemed peaceful. There would have been nothing in the room but the mattress and a microwave, an ashtray, I suppose, cartons and food wrappers he hadn't thrown away, and the little plastic prescription bottles that he referred to as his scripts. They must have called the ambulance, and that was probably a team of 3. When I woke, I visualized this narrative and thought it would be shorter. I thought that what would represent my feelings would be the absence of metaphor. But then, at the 3rd line, I discovered the three-line stanza, and it was going to be the second dignity. So I imagine he is in one of those aluminum cubicles I've seen in the movies, dressed or not. I also imagine that if they undressed him, and perhaps washed his body or gave it an alcohol rub to disinfect it, that was the job of some emigrant from a hot, poor country. Anyway, he's dressed in this stanza, which mimics the terza rima of Dante's comedy, and is a form that Wallace Stevens liked to use, and also my dear friend Robert, and seemed peaceful is a kind of metaphor. 2. Sudden and grateful memory of Mississippi John Hurt. Because I woke up again thinking of my brother's body and why anyone would care in some future that poetry addresses how a body is transferred from the medical examiner's office, which is organized by local government and issues a certificate certifying that the person in question is, in fact, dead, and names the cause or causes, to the mortuary or cremation society, most of which are privately owned businesses and run for profit, and until recently tended to be family businesses with skills and decorums, passed from father to son, and often quite ethnically specific. In a country like ours, made from chorusers of borders, as if in the intimacy of death, some tribal shame or squeamishness or sense of decorum asserted itself so that the Irish bury the Irish and the Italians. In the South, in the early years of the last century, it was the one business in which a black person could grow wealthy and pass on a trade and a modicum of independence to his children. I know this because Erlene wrote a paper about it in school and interviewed fourth-generation African-American morticians in Oakland, whose grandfathers and great-grandfathers had buried the dead in cotton towns on the Delta or along the Brazos River in Texas, passing on to their children who had gone west an order of doing things and symbolic forms of courtesy for the bereaved, and sequences of behavior at wakes and funerals, so that, for example, the eldest woman in the maternal line entered the chapel first, and what prayers were said in what order. During Prohibition, they even sold the white lightning to the men who were allowed to slip outside and take a nip and talk about the dead, while the cries and gospel song voiced contralto moans of grief that could sound like curious elation rose inside. Also, the rules for burial or burning, griefs and rituals, and inside them cosmologies, and I thought gratefully of Mississippi John Hurt's great song about Lewis Collins and its terrible tenderness, which can't be reproduced here because so much of it is in the picking of the 12-string guitar and in his sweet, reedy old man's voice. When they heard that Lewis was dead, all the people dressed in red, the angels laid him away. They laid him 6 feet under the clay. The angels laid him away.